Mic check. Mic check. Okay, very good. I think. Oh. Today's gonna be a fun stream of thoughts this time around. I don't often do them because I'm too busy explaining things, talking about the channel, because I think, well, actually, it's kind of important to get that all out of the way before I start talking about whatever and fun things. But, today's a break, an exception, well, a special case, if you will. Because, well, I don't know, we're gonna be talking about something that, well, I'm kind of interested in. And that's just games that were announced. So I guess without further ado, well, let's get started. So, okay, no, it's not broken. So, yeah, pretty much within the past week or so, we've been getting a whole load of video game announcements, and so, I don't know, I figured, well, I'd just run them up to all this, well, most things, no, not everything, probably not most things that have happened throughout the course of 2 weeks. Or at least just the things I'm interested in or I've kept an eye on. And honestly, it hasn't been a lot. A lot of things they've announced felt like, I guess, action shooters, I felt, or action based, and didn't really sell me too much on anything. A lot of things felt a bit dull for me. But that's not to say that there wasn't anything interesting. So I guess, well, let's get started. So, first thing I have is, it was PlayStation State of Play. That happened, I believe, it was maybe a week ago, a week and a day maybe. And where a whole lot of things got announced. I believe it was a 30 or 40 minute presentation they had. Anyways, from what I noted here, well, at this point in time, there were 3 things I noted, and really, I guess, just looking at the whole list, Capcom's been, well, represented quite well. Seems to be, ooh, I just lowered that a touch. I feel like Capcom has been doing a lot. And they've been, well, it feels like they've been quite successful in what they're doing. Based on my general views and opinions on it. So, starting off on my list, because I don't really talk about everything, just because of just some unawareness, or just I don't know enough about it, or yeah, I don't want to speak about it because I don't have the right information, or I'm equipped with it. First thing of note was the Resident Evil 4 remake, and that was an interesting, well, I guess they had to do it, I guess, in the time of remakes and whatnot. And so I'm wondering how much that, well, the game was loved by people. And based on how they're gonna remake it, I know that one of the big grudges people had was just, I forget if it was just constant escorting or if it was just frequent. But I'm wondering how or if they're gonna resolve that or fix that. I know they're gonna create it from, well, I believe they're gonna be rebuilding it, and so kind of one of the important things is, well, how do you patch up a weakness? How do you account for it? And will it be successful? I mean, even nowadays, things like escorting is still kind of frowned upon. And that is the use of kind of the escort missions, if you will, trying to protect or, well, guard something or someone. In this case, it's a sub 1, but no, I'm excited for it though. See how it turns out. And well, there's more Resident Evil news, but that kind of came a bit later, if I recall. And then it's also worth asking if they're gonna do Resident Evil 5 and 6 as kind of a remake, because 4 I believe, is off the top of my head. 4 was Resident Evil 1 and 2 were very horror based. I'm not sure about 3. 4 might have been kind of going into the horror and shooter. But then 5 and 6 start feeling like they become actiony. So I'm curious as to what their take on that will be, and well, if it's going to be remade. Or just depending on their approach, especially with the, well, kind of the change of approach in Resident Evil 7 and 8. Of course, you know, this is just the Resident Evil 4 remake, but, you know, just some quandaries to think about for me. Next up I have on my list is Stray. What an interesting game. Where you just play as a cat. It's been announced for a little bit, but really a lot of, well, I don't know, I believe this is the first instance of, I keep saying I believe just because I'm doubting my abilities right now, but I think this is the first time we kind of see a bit more gameplay, I believe. It's just you playing as a cat roaming in the city. Still not much is known about it. Maybe on the website, but a fascinating premise in a fascinating setting. Kind of this weird, well, an odd town. Oh yes, that's Stray. Didn't really have much about it, but I don't know, their approach is fascinating to look at. So I figured that was worth noting. And last on my state of playlist, it's not much, I know, but once again, Capcom with Street Fighter 6. Now, this is kind of one that, well, I feel like I have a lot to talk about, even though I'm not really a fan of, well, I'm not too well known about Street Fighter, nor am I really adamant about fighting games, but really but for a game that has, well, I don't know, I guess what pulled me in was that kind of artsy aesthetic that it had, kind of that almost paint-like, that paint-like design that they decide to approach the game with its new style, or stylistic approach. What fascinates me the most. Kind of adds a new touch to martial arts. Although I'm not sure if arts would actually work with art actually works alongside the art that is visual art, or if those two arts are two different things. But anyways, it's beside the point. Quite fascinating to kind of see that, well, design changes and just general, yeah, it was very aesthetically pleasing, and that's what got me excited over it. That and for you reminding me of, once again, Chris Redfield. Hey, just with a beard and general look. But that's besides the point. Then there was another thing that kind of caught my eye with Street Fighter 6, and that was kind of that concept of a free roam world, which I was curious about, of what they're gonna do with it and how they're gonna approach that. Since, well, it's a 2D fighting game. Well, like, what's the need of an open world? Especially since you would need to design so many things, you'd need to create, well, more, well, I guess a 3D design when it's simply just a 2D fighting game. And so it makes me wonder, was this necessary? What are they gonna add? I feel like since Street Fighter series is kind of, well, it is arcade based, so a lot of things are just gonna be challenging and roaming. It does make me wonder as to what exactly they plan to do with an open world design. Not open world, but I guess that like 3D free roam design. And well, I guess why they'd want to do that, because it is extra effort, but well, if they're gonna put in that extra effort, there has to be a purpose behind it, and that's kind of what I want to add. Well, that's something I'm curious about and want to see how they take on that challenge in the future. Because, well, I mean, if you are putting in different work towards this, different and extra work, well, there better be something behind it. A motive, a drive. Ooh. And with that, I'm moving on to the Games Fest. Wow. 11 minutes in, finished the state of play, 3 things. Games Fest, I only had 2 that I really want to note. And that was the first one. First one intrigued me a little bit, but I don't have much to say about it, and that was Witchfire. And I put in brackets Skyrim with gun. I feel like it's kind of been a rising thing that's come up, where you just bring guns to a fantasy world. And well, this one definitely had the Skyrim feel, where it, I guess, felt open. I'm trying to remember now, it's been a bit, but yeah, it's felt open to go about wherever. I think you're able to harness magic as well. Ooh, wow, this is really slipping away from me. Here, let's pull it up real quick. Witchfire. But I guess while I'm looking that up, the second thing I can talk about is yes, the TMNT arcade game. That's a fun one. Fun one to look at and see come to life, especially since I know the TMNT arcade games were quite well known. Anyways, yeah, so what excited me most about that was just the concept of having a 6-player multiplayer, which is fun for beat 'em up. I believe it's out now. Yeah, I believe it's out now, but kind of the one question I do want to pull from it, even though technically it's out and people have the answer, is how difficulty scaling will work. Because, well, I guess arcades generally had the problem back then of how do we raise difficulty when multiple people are there. And, well, the answer to that was often either more durable enemies or more enemies, or, well, yeah, well, basically you'd have number of players, well, you'd have number of enemies multiplied by the number of players. And so that's a way to make it more difficult, but it could also make it tedious and drag on. And so with 6 people, it's kind of hard to imagine if, say, number of enemies times 6, or if they're gonna, create a way to actually make a flow to things. Anyways, looking up a little bit on Witchfire. Nowhere near complete, but yeah, dark fantasy, first-person shooter. Not much is known about it. Well, at least as far as my information goes. I can't recall everything. There might have been a reason why I noted this, or maybe it's just generally fun, just to see that new. Well, kind of see a bit of that genre grow, a medieval shooter. Anyways, that's that. That's done with the Games Fest. That was about a 2-hour thing. There were a lot of announcements. Oh, well, they did also talk about, though this isn't in my notes, but they also talked a whole lot about The Last of Us, which is quite interesting. How they want to approach that. In that they're making a TV show and remaking the first one again. Although they did say they're kind of making it. Well, they're making it differently. So I guess that is also worth noting. Anyways, next up, and honestly, probably the big highlight. Well, probably my favorite highlight of kind of the big highlight for me every year in terms of game announcing and announcements has to be Devolver Digital. They're just very fun publishers who not only know how to, well, I guess, publish solid games, but, make a good show out of it. And so I definitely appreciate their showmanship and, well, their work behind their games. Well, work behind the games. Except this time around, not a lot of announcements. Nothing really new. I don't believe. There might have been 2 new games. Of those 2, I only noted one. But, well, I guess should also be worth noting. Speaking of their showmanship, I did get a laugh that they did bring out Suda51. That was just charming and honestly it's kind of to be expected from both parties for something like that to happen. So it's great for the both of them to collaborate. Just a little skit. Well, the big skit. Anyways, games, I guess, games. Cult of the Lamb was interesting. I believe that was their 3rd time announcing it. Or 3rd trailer off of it. Definitely has that, Don't Starve survival feel and kind of mixed in with, Dungeon Crawler. Dungeon Crawler. So that seems fun. I mean, I'm quite amused with their style, and kind of their advertising approach is fascinating as well. Kind of literally making a cult as like kind of a bright and happy thing. That's fun. They also announced the release of Card Shark, which is a game I hope I'll be playing soon. It's definitely one I've kept an eye on from playing the demo, and been, fun. It's been a different kind of game, and so it's kind of one I've been enjoying. Fun to learn, and I guess technically you could learn from that game as well. It's just about learning how to cheat in cards. Cheat in card games. and kind of putting it into practice. And so it's a fun little jaunt, I guess, as well as a story of historic, let's say historic France. It's been a bit, but it's enjoyable. They just discussed its release, and it's definitely one I look forward to playing. But then the one that I noted here is, well, The Plucky Squire. What a fascinating game that is. Just playing as a storybook character, going through an adventure in a storybook, but then eventually just popping out, kind of wandering the playroom as kind of a cartoon. So it's quite interesting, although it looks, I don't know what it looks like. Maybe a puzzle lab? Well, I don't want to put anything into it because technically they also multi-genre it. Kind of another up-and-coming trend that has been going about of having multi-genre, where there was an aspect that was Punch-Out, there was a shooter, a puzzle, combat. So that's fun. I guess I'd call it an action game. And so that's just worth noting because of, well, it's just gorgeous style. I mean, it's just a kid's storybook character, but everything just comes to life. And, well, yeah, it's a great concept to play around with. Kind of reminds me of the Petit Prince. And the stuff like, kind of like the Kirby and Yoshi's like crafted Woolly World. Just that kind of homemade, handmade feel to it. Now then, halfway there. Halfway there, it's 20 minutes in. Okay, next. Xbox felt like it had a big presentation. Xbox Bethesda, that is. First off, well, the grand re-announcement of Hollow Knight Silksong. Can't really say much about it quite yet since I'm still playing through the game as of today, but it has been quiet for I believe 2 years. And so it's great to hear and see from it again, although it is worth noting that there has been an absence there, and well, of course, their reasoning, hopefully they have a good reason for it, rather than, well, yeah, hopefully they have a good reason for it, and hope that despite it, it's still a solid game for the fans and myself, I guess. I guess I'd also call myself a fan, because I've been loving it so far. Next one worth noting. I don't know, I feel like I've noted a lot here, maybe because I felt like I didn't have a lot of notes, but it's The Last Case of Benedict Fox, and that was just, I don't know, there was, I guess maybe just it was the premise that got to me, in which it feels like an underworld, not underworldy, what's the word I'm looking for? I can't remember. Eldritch, sure. Kind of feels like an Eldritch horror-based shooter, where you are the Eldritch horror, and well, you still shoot things with gun. But generally, that was all I noted about that. And finally, this one felt big, and that was Persona for a lot of things. We got, well, I guess the definitive versions of Persona 3, 4, 5 for well, Xbox and PC, which is pretty big for those who, well, those who enjoy Persona but don't really have a PlayStation. And so now it's successful on PC, it's successful on Xbox, and so it's a, well, I don't know, it's good that it's able to get out there now. And for people to actually access all of that. Can't say much about it. I'm like I feel like a fair amount of people I'm acquainted with 5, but as for 4 and 3 I can't talk much about it, but I'm glad that it's able to get out there more. Kinda like how I felt with 13 Sentinels at the time. And finally, have Final Fantasy VII's 25th anniversary? I can't remember. That's gonna be the phrase of this, episode. But I didn't know much about it, but Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, kind of the second installation of the Final Fantasy VII remake. As someone who saw the remake, I guess I should say. I'm curious of how this story folds, and especially as someone who hasn't played the original 7, and how it's going to be accessible to both new and old audiences, since I've heard discussion that a lot of changes happening. Some unfamiliar things have happened, some surprises have happened to older fans. So I'm curious as to how the series will still appeal to both audiences, if it still can. Especially since it's going to be a 3-parter. I believe it's announced for either this winter or next winter. And then there was also, I guess as an aside, there was also an announcement for Final Fantasy VII Crisis Core. I guess it was a remake. I'm not too familiar with the Final Fantasy series, as you could tell, but well, I try my best. I'm still learning, and still wish to learn. And well, yeah, it's being remade, and then, well, I guess the biggest surprise for me was that it was coming out to Switch. Especially since, well, I'm not sure how difficult it will be carrying it over to Switch just because of its capabilities. And since the Switch only has the original Final Fantasy VII on it, I'm wondering, why bring it over to Switch? And that'd be an interesting question that I'd soon like to know the answer to. And, well, after probably the longest stream of thoughts, I think we're about done here. I'm not really the best at looking at other party, games that aren't Nintendo based. Apologies, but I still love games that are outside of Nintendo. Some of my favorite games kind of are outside of Nintendo, but well, it's my area of expertise, and they still haven't shown up, which they may or may not. But even still, I keep an eye out for games and do the best I can to learn about them. I could hopefully talk about them. Talk about them, just observe general appeal. And hopefully, see these games to their fullest potential. so it's always worth, you know, reporting on it while you still can. All in all, I mean, there was some solid news. I feel like there's more solid news if you're into action shooters or just action that I'm not really well familiar with. But well, there was something there for everyone to enjoy. Granted, there was a lot of it, so might have been hard to find said thing to enjoy, but it was still enjoyable. But yeah, that'll be it for this stream of thoughts, where we stream my thoughts of, well, summer games. So, well, I know. Well, guess if you enjoyed it, I guess tell me about it. I'll probably do more just general thoughts general thoughts and opinion-based streams once I'm done with the behind the scenes stream of thought series. And I don't know, we could talk more about games or psychology, philosophy. Hey, tabletop games, that'd be fun. But I guess until then, I guess see you next week for another installment of probably me talking about the channel again.